We interpret MAP in two different ways. We can compare MAP to a standard, and we can also compare MAP growth to expected growth using NWEA growth norms. In Plano ISD, we analyze performance compared to a standard, map performance of groups of students to national norms, and we analyze individual student MAP performance in comparison to their likelihood of success on STAR. For growth, in Plano ISD, we measure MAP performance of quintiles of students compared to district averages. This is to ensure that high, low, and middle performing students are all growing equally. And we also compare MAP growth of individual students to the growth norms. There are different ways to measure achievement. 80% on a classroom assessment means that the student answered correctly 80% of the items on the test. That 80% for one student on a classroom assessment does not tell you how the other students in the class scored. 80% could be the highest score in your class, or it could be the lowest score in your class. We can't use the percent to measure achievement on MAP because all of the students taking MAP get about 50% of the items correct. Instead, we can compare students in the same grade and subject to each other to interpret achievement. NWEA created national norms to compare students. These norms are based on the 11 million children who take MAP each year, and these norms are updated every few years to ensure that they are as up-to-date and as accurate as possible. We use percentile ranking to compare one student to others in the national norms. Imagine that you lined up all of the students who took MAP Math in grade 6, from the lowest MAP score to the highest MAP score. The student right in the middle of this line would be at the 50th percentile rank, or average. The 80th percentile rank would be closer to the highest performing students. If a student is at the 80th percentile rank, he scored higher than 80% of the other students in the same grade and the same test. Said another way, only 20% of students in the same grade who took the same assessment scored above this student. Percentile rank is about achievement of one student relative to other students. Percent correct is about how many items a student gets right. Because percent correct is not a way to determine achievement on a MAP test, we can measure MAP test results in terms of national percentile rank. In Plano, percentile rank for achievement is used in very limited specific ways. We want parents to really focus on other ways of interpreting the MAP test and using the MAP data. In Plano, we more often interpret MAP scores in terms of proficiency rather than achievement in percentile rank. To determine proficiency, NWEA compares MAP and STAR results. TEA has determined the levels of proficiency on STAR, and NWEA reports what MAP scores are likely to indicate each level of proficiency on STAR. This is how we can predict STAR results very accurately based on MAP results. This graph is from the work that we did in our district to look at the relationship between MAP and STAR. Here you see all 4,000 fifth graders in our district. On the bottom axis, we see students with MAP reading scores as low as 160, all the way up to about 258. The height of each of these green bars represents the percent of students with the same MAP score who got to the approaches level on STAR. There are a small number of students who scored in the ranges 161 to 170, 171 to 180, but none of those students got to the approaches level on our STAR test. As you look to the right, as the MAP scores go up, the likelihood of getting to the approaches level on STAR goes up. This shows visually that yes, there is a relationship between MAP and STAR. Now you notice that at some point, 100% of the students with that MAP score get to the approaches level on STAR. So looking at the data in this way, NWEA can predict what MAP score a student would need to have about a 50% chance of being successful on STAR at the end of the year, getting to that approaches level. NWEA can also predict what score a student would need to have about a 90% chance of getting to that approaches grade level on STAR at the end of the year. NWA does this kind of work with students all over the state of Texas who have both MAP and STAR results. In the linking study, NWA gives us ranges of MAP scores that indicate a student is likely to perform at a particular level of performance on STAR at the end of the year. Students at the low end of this range have about a 50% chance of that level of performance, and students at the high end of that range have a greater than 80 or 90% chance of that level of performance. Our probability ranges are posted on the Assessment, Research, and Program Evaluation website for MAP, just like all of the other documents we discussed today. This document is updated every few years as the NWA linking study is updated, so refer to the version on the website to have the most recent numbers. For a fourth grader in the fall with a MAP reading score between 205 and 212, that indicates the student is on track to score at the MEETS level on STAR at the end of the year. At the lower end of this range, the student has about a 50% likelihood. At the upper end of this range, he has a 70 to 80% likelihood. Pause and look for this document on the assessment website. The ranges on the teacher overview chart are the same ranges that are used to populate the probability ranges that appear in EdgeGents on the student profiles. A MAP score in the did not meet range, shaded pink, indicates a lack of basic knowledge of course content. A student with a MAP score in this range needs significant support in the coming year. A 3rd through 8th grade student with a MAP score in the did not meet range is unlikely to be successful on STAR at the end of the year. A MAP score in the approaches range, shaded purple, indicates some knowledge of course content, but the student may be missing some critical elements. A student with a MAP score in this range may need additional support in the coming year. A 3rd through 8th grade student with a MAP score in the approaches range is likely to perform at the approaches level on STAR at the end of the year. A MAP score in the MEETS range, shaded blue, indicates strong knowledge of course content. A student with a MAP score in this range is prepared to progress to the next grade. A 3rd through 8th grade student with a MAP score in the MEETS range is likely to perform at the MEETS level on STAR at the end of the year. A MAP score in the Masters range, shaded green, indicates mastery of the course content. A student with a MAP score in this range is on track for college and career readiness. A 3rd through 8th grade student with a MAP score in the Masters range is likely to perform at the Masters level on STAR at the end of the year. These probability ranges and the student profiles are what you are expected to use to talk to parents about MAP. This is because we display the student profile from EdgeGents in the parent portal that parents and students can access from home. All staff need to be consistent in the way we display MAP results for a student. The parents should be able to access the same visual from home and interpret it using the same information given to them by the teacher. The way we talk about MAP most of the time is in terms of growth. Growth from fall to winter, growth from winter to spring, and growth from fall to spring. Growth is the best way to talk about MAP because it compares like students. To calculate how much growth we expect to see from students, or typical growth, NWA looks at students who are in the same grade, with the same MAP subject, and the same starting RIT score for that season. In other words, your 4th grader with a fall reading MAP score of 210 is compared only to other 4th graders with a fall reading MAP score of 210 in the nationwide norming study. NWEA looks at the average amount of growth for all 4th graders with a fall reading MAP score of 210 that they got over a semester or a year. That average amount of growth is the typical expected growth. NWEA calls this projected growth. So let's look at all 4th graders who had a fall MAP score of 210 in the same subject. Some will end 4th grade below where they started. Some will grow a lot, but most will grow somewhere in the middle. Once you keep graphing, you'll see a pattern emerge. A normal distribution follows this pattern. You have few results at the upper and lower ends, and most students will grow somewhere in the middle. NWEA does this by grade and by subject for each initial MAP score. This is based on the 11 million children who take MAP every year. These are the national growth norms. Growth norms are different in reading than they are in math. Growth norms are different for students who start with a higher MAP score versus a lower MAP score. Growth norms are different for kids in lower grades versus upper grades. So if we wanted to know what would be a reasonable amount of growth to expect for a fourth grader who began the year with a MAP score of 210, what would be reasonable? Of course, the average, in this case 221. Do all students meet this typical projected growth? No, but most students get very close to that average projected growth. This is really important to understand. Projected typical growth represents the average growth actually seen from like students in the national pool. Projected growth is not how much growth we want students to get, or even how much growth a student needs to get to be on grade level or to pass STAR. Therefore, for some of your lower performing students, projected typical growth may not be enough. Projected growth scores are average, not aspirational. There are two different ways to find out what the projected or typical growth scores are for each of your students based on their initial score. The Plano ISD Assessment Department provides a spreadsheet called the Projected Growth Report Preliminary Roster to your campus. This is put in your campus data folder that your principals have access to and that they can send to you. This roster shows all of the students on your campus by snapshot date, as well as their initial MAP score for that year. It shows for each student how much growth is typical projected growth by spring. This report is only produced one time in the fall. You can also access projected growth scores on the NWEA website. The Achievement, Status, and Growth Report has the option of running a projected growth from fall to winter, winter to winter, winter to spring, or fall to spring. You can run the projection report from a term your students have taken MAP to a term when they have not yet taken MAP. This will show for each student their projected RIT score for the terms you have selected. You can also access a student's projected growth on the EdGence MAP Analytics dashboard. Click on Analytics on the far right in EdGence, then select MAP. There are many reports in the MAP dashboard, and in several of these reports you'll see an icon with two blue people. Anywhere where you see that icon, click on the two blue people to see the student listing. This listing will show your student's most recent MAP test event, as well as how much growth is projected from fall to winter or from fall to spring. The purpose of this information is for you to know how much growth you should expect for each of your students over a semester or over the course of a year. Consider, will that be enough growth for this student? Does this child need accelerated growth in order to be successful in the spring?